What's up, you guys? Today I'm going to be showing you guys how I made Gucci Purse, which is off of my new EP, Chalk It Up. It's going to be in the description. So, originally this track was made at the end of 2021. This was literally like the day I finished my finals. All of my college buddies, they decided weeks prior that we are going to do a beat making competition at one of their houses. I don't remember if it was 2021 or 2022, but I remember being super inspired by this Reptilians remix by Chi. And if you know this drop, you're probably like, oh, obviously this song is ripping off this song, which it is. It totally is. I was super inspired by this drop. I couldn't get it out of my head. But this was released in 2021, but this project file says it was made in 2022, almost a year later. So my memory recalls that this song just dropped and I really was inspired by it and I wanted to make something like it. I don't remember if the time reset because I transferred this from the hard drive or something like that. So it has a different date. I'm not sure. But either way, what is definitely fact is that I made this right after finals. Literally hours after finals. I remember finishing up and then getting a little bit of lunch and then walking over to their house. And then I was actually a couple hours late to the beat making competition, and I remember just playing catch up to the best of my ability. Everyone else isn't quite as versed in their DAWs as I am, so they all knew that if they got the head start, it really didn't make much of a difference. But I remember I was able to catch up and I pretty much made this whole track in one sitting, like this whole 3 hour time span that I had when I showed up. So let's get into the actual breakdown. Right out of the gate, during this competition, I started with the drop right away. And I started with these rap vocals. I remember a couple weeks prior downloading a couple of these taster packs from loopmasters.com. They had these ghetto trap acapellas. And right here they have download taster pack, which is basically a little like best highlights of the entire thing. So if you want more vocals like this, I would recommend to buy this sample pack. I personally didn't because I was just trying to compile as many different variety of free samples that are out there. I'm sure the whole thing is great pack. I haven't bought it, but I'm gonna endorse it from the little taster that I did get. So the whole thing, $33. Consider it. In this project file, I also had it auto-tuned with the Waves real-time stereo auto-tune, and I also had CLA vocals to bring up the volume and give it a little extra bite. So pretty much these vocals are unprocessed for this video, but obviously in the track they're good to go. For now, these vocals are going to be a little bit more quiet than they normally are, but this is pretty much the drop.
Put you on purse, hit me on the chirp if you need some work. Ay. When I'm in the dry head, bitches stop and stare. Yeah, I'm up, goddamn.
You can clearly hear the Chi influence if you listen to this drop.
And reptilians.
They go back. They go back. They go back.
So this song was clearly on my mind when I worked on this. On top of that, I was also very inspired by the Chi sample pack that's up on his Bandcamp pages, so check those out if you want more drums like this. Here's the kick. Here's the snare he used. This pretty much carries the track. This was also a big reason why I was considering not putting this track out, just because it's not enough of my own samples, but I think enough of my friends have listened to this and told me that it brings enough of an original idea that it's worth putting out, and I guess I'm glad I put this out. So put your biases aside and just appreciate what you made for what it is. And I think others will as well. Here I have the vocal chopped right here. Has an echo on it, little delay. And then I also have the vocal here, but it's muted.
Gucci on purse.
But that is used as a carrier. I don't know how the vocoder terminology is technically used, so I'm gonna just say this is the source of and the source material that is being used in the vocoder, which is on top of these basses here. Here is one layer that pretty much is what carries the vibe of the main drop here. But if I put this all in a group and just look at the original patch, it looks like this. The most bland, generic thing you could ever possibly make in Serum. Just a spectral wavetable in this like machine gun little formation with tube distortion and multi-band compression, and that's literally it. But this got low cut, and then has the vocal being routed into it with a vocoder with the depth all the way up, which I think makes it watery. I have the bands all the way up. I have enhance on, and I have this release set to here. I don't know if that's default or not. And then I think I have this other vocoder being turned on in other sections of the song. I'm not quite sure what it's doing. Yeah, it's turned on in the B section. Makes it a little more watery, I think. If I muted it. Okay, it's just the same setup as this, except the depth is just a little bit different. I just have it alternating between these sections just to have the settings how I want it to be, I guess, and it gives me the flexibility to change the settings for those respective sections if I really wanted to, rather than just automating the depth knob and then losing track of the settings that I have for each of those sections. That's kind of my meta when I'm producing, is I pretty much put things in groups, and then I put them in groups again and use the most outermost group as like a enable and disable button, pretty much. EQ'd it with more of a high pass, reverb, another high pass, another spectral resonator idea. So really, all this is just this death step machine gun sound layered with this vocoder, with the vocal being routed into it with the depth all the way up. And that's about it. That's really what makes this sound. On top of that, there's also another layer with another vocoder doing a very similar thing. Literally the same patch. Another vocoder with a different type of depth. This one also has the spectral resonator. This one doesn't have it on, but this one does. Makes it a little bit more robotic, I guess, and high passed. And then underneath all that, to create a proper bass, I have this Reese going on. Sounds like this. Kind of a squelchy, talky kind of Reese. Looks like this. The sub is a triangle. The main sound is a sine wave with a saw wave being FM'd into it. Also got a flange minus filter on here, also being automated by this LFO. And then just a tad bit of distortion and some white noise. Let's hear this with and without processing. Without. With. I'm sure this is the sort of sound that I was tweaking the parameters after I gave it some post-processing. Just keep that in mind. I would probably slap on a couple OTTs like I did here if you're trying to recreate a sound like this, and then automate an auto filter to create that movement right out of the gate. So I have OTT 1, OTT 2, saturator, overdrive, kick tight, cut low mids, auto filter, so it matched the vocal enunciations. And then all together, you have the first hit within the drop, layered on top of this vocal, has this FM8 that sounds like this. Also another vital sound that carries the track in a lot of ways. Here's the FM8 patch. It's literally just 2 sine waves. It's just up an octave, I think. I don't know the relationship between 1 and 2 within the ratio knob, but or maybe it's up a third or a fifth or something like that. But basically, it's just 2 sine waves. We have an erosion. Give it a little bit of white noise, a little buzz. We have a redux to kind of break the sound a little bit of a hiss. OTT. Glue compressor. Then we have this frequency shifter that is putting a ring mod on the high end. Scoop the mids. Fat rack. Kick tight. And then turn down the highs a little bit. And that's the sound. This is what it sounds like on its own. If we open up the serum patch and turn off the processing, sounds like this. During this era of my production, I created a lot of patches where I would start with a sine wave, and then I would FM basic shapes into this to create different bass-driven sort of sounds. So basically, I have this sine wave here with a little bit of noise. This is also a very cool version of the sound. If I just turn the noise off, I would have the sub here as well to bypass all the effects going on in here. But it's basically just a saw wave or a triangle. Yeah, it's a triangle, I think. Yeah, it's just a saw wave with the mirror knob being adjusted by this slow rising LFO. Creates this new articulation. And then it's being FM'd from there. And then the effects are like this. The matrix is like this. And then noise. And then after that, we have the post-processing. The sound is already pretty beefy on its own, but this auto filter is just to create some more phase movement within the sound to make it a little more interesting. Makes it sound a little more flangy. Then we got fat rack. Kick tight, which brings back the sub. Makes it sound a little more mid-scooped as well, which I personally like. I cut the sides. And that is pretty much the main sound. And then I would just copy and paste a new lane and just create a different articulation. I guess I just kept the auto filter from moving. Maybe I changed the cutoff in this patch, but ultimately I really don't know what I'm doing here that's making the sound different. But it's pretty much the same patch. And then in the second half of this song, I have different versions also up here. I don't know why this is way up here. I should just drag it down. But the second half sounds like this. Just 2 more versions, which has this triplet instead of the main hit. Just changed it from instead of a saw wave to a sine. Brought the combs filter down instead of up. It's usually up here. brought it down here. Got rid of the noise. Gave it some hyperdimension, I guess, and a phaser, but pretty much the same post-processing. I have a fat rack here. Got rid of a specific frequency here, I guess. Kick tight, scoop the low end in the sides, and then gave it a little saturation boost. And then turned it down a smidge, and then sits just right in the mix. And I pretty much made a very similar articulation to this one, I think. No. This one. Same thing, I probably just moved the comb filter a little bit, and I also bandpassed it. I also had post-processing on the whole group, which is basically just a little bit of extra saturation, scooping the lows on the side. I don't know why I was so persistent about that in the past, but I also used side widener. The first version doesn't work anymore for some reason, so I usually use the second side widener. It's nothing crazy. I just crank the knob to taste to give it some nice width. So that's pretty much it for the sound design. Everything else is pretty much drums. Here we have a crash. Classic crash that's used in so many hip-hop tunes. Joe B ride. DJs from Mars, a free sample pack I found online. Has a very nice ride right there. Shaker. And then a breakbeat. Interesting. I don't remember this. It's there. I totally forgot this was in the track, but it's basically a breakbeat, quantized, and then in the warp modes, I have it set to beat, transients, and then I have it set to here, this mode, and then just brought this slider down a bit just so it cuts off the tails a little bit, so you're only getting about this much of the transients. So you get this nice chopped up vibe instead of having the full thing sound like this. Too much tail. Just gotta bring it down to 34. It sounds just nice. From there, I had pretty much the whole drop made just from those few elements. So I made an intro pretty much without the sound design, but I would just have the vocals be the main element, I guess. The only difference is instead of this cheese snare, I had this hip-hop snare, very iconic chop snare. And then I have this 808 instead of these dubsteppy halftime bass lines.
Hit me on the chirp if you need some work. Ay, when I'm in a drought, head bitches stop and stare. Blowing up like a Molotov.
And then I would throw all these bells and whistles in here, like the money counting machine, this ha sample, and then really just the same drums. I also had this little, it's called radio pluck. Same symbol but reversed. I also love this sample. Place that in there, right in this gap. And the one other thing about this track that I do a lot in my halftime stuff that is a technique that I think a lot of people sleep on is using this Valhalla shimmer. So what I did was I pretty much recorded the basses in the drop. So if I do the same thing, if I just solo this track, resample, in, record button, and just record this without the sidechain, drag it over here, get Valhalla Shimmer. Let's mute this, the original version, and just work with this resampled version of the basses and the drop. Have them mix all the way up. Smidge of feedback, I think. Diffusion down, size down, and then you get this cool sucked in transformer kind of reverb going on. And pretty much just play with the diffusion and size. And then once you get a version that you're happy with, just freeze and flatten. Shift it over. And then you get this cool swampy bridge section going on. That sounds like this.
Going out like a motherfucker. Put your purse up. Put your purse up. Put your purse up. Put your purse up.
And then obviously I just rearranged the drums to come in a little bit more sparsely in the bridge and then pick up in the riser. I had this free sample pack from Crow on YouTube. In the background during the riser, I had a different selection of kick and snares for the riser. I had the short thumpy kick that I use in most of my older tracks. That was my go-to back in the day. Sounds like this. It's filtered. Basically, I got a bandpass going on here to shifting through the frequency spectrum in the riser. And then I have this trap snare that was being risen up with Little Altar Boy in pitch in the riser. Also, when I was making this, I really was also considering scrapping this song because I really didn't have any ideas for a second drop. But, you know, with enough people persuading me to put this out, I just kind of came to terms that it doesn't need a second drop. I think it was good just the way it is. Short, sweet, kept it simple, doesn't overstay its welcome. I think it's good that way. So, thank you guys for watching this video. Check out the other track breakdowns that I also made, and you guys have a nice one.